Today I'd like to talk about the ultimate fate of mankind, as usual. This particular lesson will be about the somewhat complex ramifications of self-evident and obvious truths, and why it's often important to consciously examine such things in detail so that we don't miss out on easily accessible but potentially pivotal knowledge which could be empowering and useful. The first self-evident truth which I would like to examine is that each individual person does, as a matter of fact, have a say in our own destiny. We can, each of us, choose what it is we wish to do in the world with our own time, obviously. The deeper implication of this is that humanity's destiny is defined largely by our collective belief structures, which forge what it is we choose to do with ourselves. If you can make a person believe that they are powerless to control their destiny, then they will act out that belief and have less power. If you can make a person believe that they must follow your will and able to survive, then they will follow your will. If you can make a person believe that there's a narrow framework of how humans are supposed to behave and that anybody operating outside that narrow framework should be ostracized or poisoned for their unforgivable strangeness, then people will change their destiny based upon that belief. Therefore, the further implication of this simple fact that we are co-creators in our own destiny is that the primary battlefield upon which a war for the fate of the future is being waged is not a battlefield of bullets and blood, but one of lies and truth, ignorance and research, conformity and authenticity. Once you understand this importance of the power of the mind and of our beliefs in what we, as humans, can and or should do with ourselves, there are a few more obvious truths which should be examined and able to more fully grasp the nature of this war for our collective fate. It should be self-evident that it is possible to improve and grow, and that it is possible also to stagnate and degrade, and that there are behaviors which lend to each of these trajectories. It should be intuitive that to build the optimal future for all good people, the process of growth must be not only made easily available, but subconsciously and intellectually encouraged through an understanding that continually growing and improving has very obvious benefits for oneself as well as the nature of the world around us. It should also be understood that motivation and willpower are a major determining factor in this process of continual growth. On the flip side, in analyzing the process of degradation and decay, it should be noted that it is, simply logistically, easier to control something when it is weaker. Therefore, for those motivated purely by control, encouraging the degradation and decay of others is simply rational. Understanding this sort of motivation of selfish, hedonistic, unempathic control of others is crucial to understanding how and why the world works as it does. Those who are intuitively bound by empathy often do not consciously seek to understand the logic of those who are not. This lack of comprehension is a grave threat to the future of humanity. For understanding that there are many who not only lack empathy but often enjoy profiting from the suffering of others, and that their motivation is, logically, to degrade others in subtle ways to more easily control them. This understanding is absolutely necessary if one wishes to protect oneself and one's loved ones from such cruel entities. This should be a straightforward and intuitive thing to realize and understand, but I honestly believe that if mass society could be encouraged to consciously hold this awareness, it would lead to a significant change in the way all people absorb information. They might then ask, is this information limiting or benefiting me? Am I trusting it too readily, allowing it to control my beliefs and actions without validating it? These are all necessary questions which people ought to ask when observing any information in this world, if they understand that there are many psychopaths conspiring to bind them to weakness and limit their potential motion. Seeing all these intuitive truths coming together in the big picture should lead you to recognize that the war for truth, authenticity, and opportunity for the future of mankind is somewhat more complex than it may seem. The deceivers and conspirators who have long sought to control and consume the power of the innocent are deeply studied in the psychological manipulation of their prey. Very few people are presently invested in fighting for their own future or in contemplating the true nature of the world enough to understand the sort of depraved bondage that has been planned for them if they do not fight back. Most assume that whatever happens is simply out of their control, and thus it is. These forces, which seek constantly to limit the beliefs, inhibit the motivations, and degrade the general trajectory of mankind's evolution and actions for the sake of control, have constructed many such psychological prisons over the majority of people around the world. Encouraging people to engage in psychological, philosophical, or spiritual contemplation which would be of direct benefit to their own well-being and future is seen as a sort of terrifying abstraction or joke. Due to the combined efforts of these degrading forces, as well as the consent of most people, put simply, most people do not care at all to purify themselves in knowledge and truth, nor to help manifest a future in which mankind is taught the necessary skepticism, as well as the dignity and the virtue with which to protect themselves from the pervasive deceptions of all false authorities in this world. Is it then appropriate for us to waste time weeping for their decision to revel in their own degrading arrogance? Or are there more effective ways in which we can focus our energy, our wisdom, and our sacred memes to help guide those precious few whose spirits, through all unjust torment and judgment, yet seek beyond the decadent illusions of this perverse world? What is the best way to make the world a better place? How can an understanding of the process of growth and the motivation to inhibit that growth for the sake of control be effectively injected into a culture so righteously bent on its own depopulation? How will the things we calculate as worthy of emanation change the way others choose to spend the duration of their lives?